Oh,
okay.
wow. Wow. I've
I
never
do
noticed
consent.
that before. That must be a
That's
new
new.
setting they turned
That
on.
was like a robot.
That was crazy. All right. Well, for everybody who is joining us, thank you. I'm giving you guys all a second to get logged in. There we go. I see you guys starting to join. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. As I said before, I'm Carrie, and I'm on the Andersons events team. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to welcome you to our event, of course, tonight with Meg Bashwiner and Joseph Fink in discussion with Hal Lublin, who I forgot. Is it Lublin or Lublin?
It's Loveland, but it was changed in like the 30s or 40s. So you're correct either way.
So I'm good. I like that one. That's the answer.
Yeah. Roll with it.
I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Of course, the Anderson family has been selling books independently since 1875. And so we've made it through some really hard times before, and we are going to make it through this hard time too. But we just want to let you know that your support of this event by attending tonight and your purchase of the book through us allows us to remain in business. And we are truly grateful to you all, especially right now. A couple things about tonight before we get started. We will have a Q&A session at the end. So what you can do, because this is webinar format, you're going to go ahead and you're going to submit those questions just through the Q&A button there at the bottom of your screen. It's right there in the middle at the bottom. If you mouse over, go ahead and submit your questions at any time during the event. And Hal is going to be collecting them, and he will be feeding them to the authors at the end of the event or during whenever it makes sense. So just please keep submitting them all the way through the event. I've done, I don't know, hundreds of these online events at this point, and I can just tell you that for some reason in this digital format, everyone is really shy and no one asks questions. And you'd think it'd be the opposite because, of course, if we were in person, we can never get through all the questions. So please, please, please ask questions because it just makes for a much more fun and interactive event for all of us. So I just want to really encourage you to do that. One more thing, if you ordered a book for tonight, know that you will receive an email when your books are either ready to pick up or have shipped. And I just want to warn you guys that this can sometimes take a day or two, depending on which option you chose, because we have actual human beings who process those orders. We don't have machines and robots, so it just takes us a day or two to get through them all. If you haven't ordered a book for tonight, actually, I think you had to with this ticket, then if you'd like another signed copy, and I want to remind you that it's graduation season and Father's Day is right around the corner. And of course, signed books just make like really fun and unique gifts, and they never cost more in Andersons, of course. So I will be putting info in the chat with a link to order for those. And it's always great to get a second copy, like I said. But now to get on to the good stuff, we are here tonight, of course, with Meg Bashwiner and Joseph Fink to discuss their marital and life memoir, The First 10 Years. Meg is a writer, performer, producer, and tour manager. Joseph is the creator, of course, of Welcome to Night Vale and Alice Isn't Dead podcasts, and the New York Times bestselling author of adult and middle grade books. They live together, splitting their time between the Hudson River Valley and Los Angeles. And they will be in conversation tonight with Hal Lublin, who is an American actor, podcaster, and voiceover artist, best known for his work on the Thrilling Adventure Hour and Welcome to Night Vale. So welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for being here. And I will be just off camera if you need anything.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you. Well,
Hal, you're American. You never told us.
Well, I like to be ambiguous about my nationality, but I figure you bared it all in this book, so I'm going to bear it all right here, just out of respect to you.
America's sweetheart.
America's sweetheart, Hal Lublin is here. It's so great to see both of you, and
it's wonderful to see you.
The book is fantastic.
Thanks.
And
thank
you. I have a ton of questions, and I want to talk all about it. But I also want to say here in front of all of these people how weird it was to read all of these stories, both events that I was either somewhat present for or there just before or after or heard about. I've known you for the entirety of the time I've known both of you. You've been together, so it was great to go back and get more detail on the story of how you met, and the format of the not dueling but sort of parallel essays for each year is great. It's such a great device. But I want to know what motivated the idea to do the book.
That's you.
Oh, that's me. I really like artistic games. I like challenges that kind of force you to try a thing that, yeah, it forces you to write in a way that you would otherwise never would. And so in about the like 9th year out of these 10 years, I came up with the idea of us writing about our first 10 years together, without consulting each other and just letting those differences in memory conflict. And it seemed like a really fun game, mainly because one of the reasons I never really write nonfiction, one of the reasons I write, in fact, generally very unrealistic fiction, is that I really hate the thought of getting details wrong. I get really in my head about like, is this chair a kind of chair that someone in 1830 would use? And so I never really do that. But the beautiful thing about this idea is it meant that I could get everything wrong and it didn't matter, because the whole point is it's just how I remember it, however that is.
Sure. And for you, Meg, when he comes to you with the idea, were you sort of all in right away, or did you have any reservations about it? Because you both get really deep and it's really honest, which is one of the great things, like reading through it, is it's unfiltered.
Yeah, I was excited about the idea when Joseph brought it to me. It felt like this is my first book. I have written hundreds of short plays, but have never committed to a book of this length. So it felt like a really great way to write a first book, which is to write half of it with someone you know, and then also to have a very strict structure. So it was very much writing to assignment of write your 2009. This is how many words we're looking at. Your prompt is 2009. Go nuts. So yeah, I was immediately like, hey, yeah, totally. This is something that feels achievable. As opposed to just being like, oh, I'm going to write my first book. It's a memoir. Here's a blank page. You have to fill 270 of these. So, but the structure was already there. So I was definitely on board. And as far as the personal stuff goes, like, we're working with the Neo-Futurists, this is your Chicago people, Anderson. So, the Chicago Neo-Futurists, if not, they're a theater company that specializes in non-illusory storytelling. So we don't play characters. We don't tell lies on stage. We are ourselves. We tell the stories of our lives. So I had spent all of these 10 years writing these very personal plays in front of an audience. So I was, totally. I think that holding anything back at this point would make for not good storytelling, especially in this specific sort of memoir.
Yeah. Did you, I know that there's the one ground rule of we're not going to consult with one another as we write the essays. At what point did you get to read the other's work? And then what resulted out of that?
We waited till we were kind of about to send it to our editor. We had conversations. So we'd be like, oh, for 2014, I'm thinking about writing about X. And Joseph would say, oh, for 2014, I'm thinking about writing about Y, just to kind of see where we were at. But we didn't really share text until it was about to go to the editor. And when we did share text, it was pretty much from like a writer notes editorial standpoint. So it was like, oh, this paragraph feels extraneous, or this part could be stronger, or this could be X, Y, and Z. You said this twice, you repeated this word, that sort of stuff. So it was never really super content based. There were some things where I was like, that's wrong, but the game was that I could say that's wrong, but he didn't have to change it. Like, so
yeah, she had a lot of notes on like the order of events or the dates that things happened. And I just was very much like, I'm sure you're right, but I'm not going to change any of this.
Yeah. I mean, you weren't always sure I was right. And who knows? There's some stuff that I wasn't sure I was right about. We differ on stuff that we don't have the receipts to back up, but some stuff we do have the receipts to back up.
So, yeah, there is actually a very interesting example in 2011 of like a fairly pivotal conversation in our relationship. It was kind of the one where we first discussed that this might be a lifelong relationship, and we remember it happening in two completely different places. And I just have such a clear memory of it in one place, and she has such a clear memory of it happening in a different place. And it doesn't really matter where it happened, but it is just weird how memory works.
We do both remember that it happened though, and we both wrote about it, so independently. So there's that. But
yeah, the location doesn't matter as much as the conversation. It feels like the important, like I got into a pattern reading it of all right, here's Joseph's regulation. Now I'm going to see the Rashomon of it when Meg comes in. And often what's great is that the essays can be about completely different things, but the touch points are enough to tie it together and be like, oh, wait, maybe he still owes her money for that thing, or uh this is the different location. And like playing the game with myself of who do I think got that detail right, like it's a game show.
Mhm.
But the I don't even know, this isn't even a question, it was just a something that really stuck out to me, which is dealing with the death of your father, because I lost my mother. So like we both lost a parent, we both had someone with us who was somewhat, I mean, I was married to Jennifer for less than a year at that point, and that thrust her into a caretaker role. And to both hear about your processing of that initial impacting grief, and the side that Meg had of being in this role, being thrust into this role all of a sudden, just that hit really hard, to the point where I had to put it down and go talk to Jennifer and say, like, I just want to tell you again how much I appreciate what you did in that time and what that meant to me. So it's not a question, just like that. I really appreciated the honesty that both of you had about what's a really difficult thing to talk about, even if you're trained to talk about difficult things.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I literally start the chapter by saying it was hard to write, because it was, but it ultimately, that's my favorite essay in the book. I'm really happy with how that turned out. Yeah, and it was an interesting time because, my father died like 2 months later. My sister got married. And it really was like this time of my father died very young. He died at 56. And so I think in my head, I kind of bookmarked that as like, that's how many years I get. Anything past that is a maybe bonus. But I just started kind of working on the unconscious assumption that I was going to also die young. Not unlike an actual belief, just it's sort of my brain was like, that's the end. And so I think it really got me starting to think about like, well, what do I want the rest of my life to look like? It kind of forced that reckoning.
Yeah. And that's kind of, I mean, that's one of the things that's kind of my argument for marriage, and sort of my argument for a marriage chapter, is that like the reason I was choosing partnership was not for any sort of conventional thing, but really just the wanting to be with someone through the good and the bad, and like needing to be there for them for the bad, caring about them so much that you can't imagine any other person being with them through something like that. So yeah,
one of the things that I came away from it with, and also just from observing the two of you for what, 8 years now.
yeah, you've been a part of these 10 years. You've been
Yeah, I mean, I know how much you care for each other, and I know the little things that make up a strong relationship, but also that what struck me more than anything is that something that seems central to both of you is taking care, not being taken care of, but taking care of the other person, and how paramount that is to both of you, knowing like, this is how I know this is the person I want to be with for the rest of my life. I want to care for them, and I want to care for them. And that is that something that you, were there realizations through writing this that came to mind, or was this just writing down something that you had already expressed in some way over the years?
I do think that writing it did help kind of sort the argument or justify the decisions that we've made over the years. A lot of writing a memoir is justifying your decisions because you're sharing it. So you're saying, I did this thing and this is why I did it, and figuring that out. And that's not something that you always have in the moment, especially in moments of high stress or big things happening. It's you're acting reactionary. And then when you look at it from the side of writing a memoir, looking back on 10 years, you can say, yeah, I did that because of this, whether you did or not. I mean, you hope that you did these things for the reasons that you feel like you did. But yeah, that is sort of how we got to sort of not just, I guess, justify, or like at least define our partnership, is that a big part of our partnership is being each other's person to take care of each other. And
yeah, I mean, I feel like the taking care of comes naturally out of just like, there's no one more important to me. And so if somebody who means that much to you needs something, it's not like a thing you balance out or do an equation. It's just sort of a natural move to be like, oh, let me help you. Like, especially if they need something in a like serious way, emotionally or physically, then you kind of immediately go into that mode of what can I do?
Yeah, love is a complicated thing. It's not, and love is often presented to us in this format of story because it's the classic. It's the love story. It's something that people really connect to and want to see. But it's something that is often oversimplified or often presented in a way that isn't necessarily how love is. I mean, Hal, you've been married for a very long time.
Yep.
You've been inside your apartment with Jennifer for the past year and a half. Like you understand that like love it's not. Choosing to be with someone every day is an act, and it's an act that for most of the time we really enjoy doing, but it definitely is there. It's a verb. It's an act of doing. It's not just like, oh, we have this deep and chemical connection and everything we know about it. Like you can have that, but also like you have to make them dinner sometimes when they've had a long day, or you have to, fold their t-shirt so it fits in the drawer the right way so that they can find it when they need it. Like it's that those sort of little things that really make up, to me, what love is, what romantic love is kind of care, wanting to be in the same room as a person, obviously, and wanting to
Sure.
be totally enamored with them. Yes. But also, yeah, wanting to take care of them. And that, yeah, I think that love isn't often presented in that way, from a storytelling point of view.
Yeah, I think there's an instinct, at least in the fictional world, of like hanging on to the heat of the initial part of a relationship, which obviously was there for you too, but eventually you build off of that. And like over 10 years, you go from being two kids to being two adults, not only because of the success of Night Vale and all the other projects that have sprung up after that, but just emotionally for one another. Do you feel like the things like touring around the world, at which obviously very romantic at first, but eventually the realities of it are a little bit more stark, and then Meg, you taking over as tour manager, do you feel like those things speed up the maturation process in a good way, or it's sort of like, well, here's boot camp, and now also you got to manage a relationship in the different stages of that?
It definitely was a bit of a boot camp. I mean, I think there was a huge learning process of, because we had toured a little, or we had traveled a little bit together, but not a lot. And we had never really worked together. And working with your partner is a hard thing to manage, and traveling with your partner can be a hard thing to manage, and having to learn how to do both simultaneously while doing this very big thing that none of us had any idea how to do. It's not a thing that, it's mostly not a thing that you get taught, other than if you suddenly have to do it, the people who also do it are like, oh, hey, let me tell you how to do this. It's kind of, it's all this like word of mouth knowledge that gets passed on. And I mean, it's one of the reasons why I felt fairly confident with our ability to be parents. Not that I think they're exactly the same, but I do think that like we learned how to manage doing a very hard thing that completely takes over your life together, and we learned how to maintain a relationship through that. And so it does feel like we did that, we can do this.
Yeah, it definitely was a bit of a boot camp, but there also was a lot of comfort in it. Being on the road is lonely if you're alone. I'm on the road, or I was on the road a lot recently alone, and it's lonely, and it's tiring, and you miss your family, and you miss any sense of home. And having your person with you is really nice. It's difficult though, because you're at work and you're all tired, you're all frustrated, and I wouldn't necessarily like be snippy to Jeffrey Craner about something the way I would be snippy to Joseph, because we have a closer relationship, and a more intimate relationship. So it's like, when we first did that tour together, we were definitely bickering with each other, and poor Jeffrey and Cecil were like there as well. So it's like you're at work, you're with a couple that's arguing, and we're all trying to do this thing that we have no idea what we're doing. So I think that it was beneficial to us, and maybe not so great for the other people who were on the road with us at first. But also just like that's, and not like we don't really, I wouldn't say we bicker constantly, but we definitely call each other on shit every day and like hash it out. And so for some people that can make them feel uncomfortable. It can be like, these people are arguing a lot, and that's weird to be around, but it is kind of, I don't know how we operate.
Well, I mean, you point out, it's pointed out in the book, it's like learning how to fight. And that's a very big thing. And that can evolve over the course of a relationship too. But I also like reading it, I was like, there are a lot of passages of Meg screaming. I don't think I've ever seen her raise her voice once off of a stage because, uh, I mean, on the road, especially when you're handling all these things, like you have to be the one who keeps it together. But like, I was like, oh, there's an at-home Joseph and Megan because I haven't been there to see. I don't know what's happening with all of this with the screen, but it makes sense too because you're both very like low key people. Like you are generally calm and talking to people, like not explosive or fly off the handle. So it's just there's you definitely get like added dimension to both of you that way.
Yeah.
Feel free to fight in front of me is what I'm saying.
Also just like the yelling in the house a lot of times is just because I'm too lazy to walk up or down the stairs.
Sure.
So I use
she does have a system where she just stands wherever she is in our house that's 3 stories, including my basement office, and then she just screams. And then I'll come up and she'll be like, didn't you hear me say this? I'm like, no, because I was like listening to music in the basement and you're upstairs in the bathroom screaming.
He also, in the basement, he has a dehumidifier constantly running and the washer and dryer are down there. So it's like kind of competing against a lot of white noise.
Mm-hmm.
But I am a professionally trained actor, so.
Sure. You just provided there. You've been to my home, Meg. It is not large. And my wife has been in the bathroom with the fan on and the washer and dryer have been going and the air conditioner. And I've still yelled from 16 feet away and not realize that she can't hear me. Like over and like she'll go, what? And I'll just yell again the exact same volume. So that's happening everywhere. You have more distance at least you can say, oh, well, I was doing it for a different floor. So I feel better about your situation than mine. I should just walk 10 feet.
Yeah, we all should, but we're not going to. So
yeah, let's be honest. There's a reason why we don't want to move in that moment.
Yeah.
And that's in chapter, no. Your final essay, Meg, which is a letter to your unborn child. Number one, it's spoiled at the beginning of the book that you are pregnant.
Yeah.
At this point, very pregnant.
Very.
Yes. And I you know, for people who are watching who don't know, Meg and I host a podcast together. And every time we go to record or we've gone to record over the past several months, I've been like, I have to remember that this is not something to discuss on the air. But now I feel like it's out there.
It's out there.
How does it feel now because when you wrote that, you were not pregnant. You were trying. Yes.
We had, when did I write it? I'm trying to think. I guess I wrote it at the end of 2019 because we had just kind of started the like putting the things in motion to begin the process of that. So it was before we had any sort of data about what any of this would be like, whether, how fertility would go for us, all that stuff. So yeah, it was an interesting perspective, and I'm happy that I wrote it.
Yeah.
Things have changed now, being 9 months pregnant. But I think the advice remains the same. So
yeah. And it's really interesting to hear both of you, like the journey to the discussion of having children and what it meant from sort of the abstract idea of it would be nice to getting to a point where it was a decision that had to be made. I don't have a question for a lot of this. I just find it really interesting and I like talking about it with both of you. I don't know if I'm doing this right. Sorry, Andersons. Don't come back on, Carrie, please. Please don't.
Hal, you're doing great.
Okay, great.
This is good book event. It's when when you're a neo-futurist or when you're a memoirist and nonfiction writer, this is the stuff you write about. So this is the things like major events that are happening in your life, minor events that are happening in your life, that you are going to have to filter them and make art out of them. So sometimes while you're experiencing them, you're like, this is, weird, hard, stressful, tiring, but also one day I'm going to write something really beautiful about it. So.
I feel like the other well, for if you're reading the book and you weren't aware that Meg was pregnant, sorry I spoiled it, and you should have read that first page. But also like the two sort of things that are unresolved in the book is that you're going to attempt to have children. We don't know that you're having one unless we read that. But the other is, are we going to live in New York or LA? You've split your time between both. I remember the place with the goats. I was at the house that you rented most recently. Where is the process of having a child make you say we're gonna have to wait a while to decide because we need to be stationary with the child for a bit, or is it we're still figuring it out, we're gonna try both places?
I mean, it's been really like we can't travel with her for a bit, and so we moved out of the LA place just because it made no sense to have when we couldn't go there for a long time. But it absolutely broke my heart because I really, really love LA. It's, I grew up right near it, and most of my family lives around there, and it really is where I feel most at home. It feels like home the way that nowhere else in this world does. So the plan is to come back kind of once she's old enough to fly and has like, all her shots and tags, and they've clipped her ear to show that she's gotten vaccinated. So once we do all that, we can like put her in the little carrier and put her under the seat and fly back to LA. That's the plan. But yeah, it really felt very emotionally bad for me.
Yeah.
Sure.
Whereas I kind of had the opposite experience of, I mean, I love LA. I also find it home. And if I, pandemic aside, I feel like we probably would have kept our home in LA because I don't feel weird about flying with a baby. I feel weird about flying with an unvaccinated baby during a pandemic. So that was kind of and also we didn't really have too much timeline. Like when I first found out I was pregnant, there was no one had even heard that vaccines were going to work or exist or whatever.
Yeah.
So we started planning for the future without having any of that knowledge. But because of science, we are, hopefully in the US getting towards a place where it's a lot safer to travel, and getting to a place where we'll have some data about vaccinating, a 6-month-old kid. So there is that. But yeah, for me, it was like, I have all of these things that I have to do to get ready to be a mom and to get ready to do all of that, and having like kind of the up in the air of Los Angeles and trying to get back and forth between the two. It's like, such a like an affluent problem is like, oh, I can't get between my two houses because of my baby. But it definitely made me feel more resolved to be able to settle into New York. And we'll probably keep kicking this down the road. We don't really have to pick a coast until I guess until she's like attends school, maybe. So
Right.
So we've got some time. We'll probably pick LA, and then
Meg just keeps saying that we'll send her to, and I quote, an elite forest school. And then when I ask her any follow-up questions, she can't tell me anything about it, but she's just like, I think we just send her away to an elite forest school.
I don't think we sent her away to an elite forest school. There's this Instagram mom that I follow, and one of her kids goes to an elite forest school. And I find the concept hilarious.
I don't know what an elite forest school is.
I don't really either, but it's like such an Instagram mom thing.
I just imagine Bigfoot as a teacher there.
Yeah. I just like imagine all of the kids just like in down jackets up to their nose all day, like in an evergreen tree, just like there's just children in the trees.
Yeah, and Voss water everywhere because
yes,
it's LA.
It's elite. They're in their Patagonia jackets up to their
Yeah. Oh, I also want to say how nice it is to absorb a piece of culture that is about the world that we live in that doesn't like, I feel like everything I've watched that's a documentary in the past year has ended with like people are starting to get sick and things are starting to shut down. So it's nice that that we only go up to 2019 because it's obviously when the world shuts down, it's completely different. And it's nice to remember what the world was like before all of that.
Yeah, we finished writing it like in December of 2019, like January of 2020. So it was just like by the skin of our teeth that we wrote it before. And it's funny because I agree now that like it's such a bummer watching like reality TV or documentaries or stuff where it's like all this stuff's happening. And at the end, it's like, oh, cool. I have to relive March of 2020 all over again for the 15th time. This is going to be great. But it's during that year, I didn't spend a lot of time worrying that no one was going to want to read this because it doesn't address COVID, which is such a funny thought now that we're all so complete. But I'm like, oh, is anyone going to be able to relate to this? Is anyone going to care? Because it's not about COVID.
I do think there is that kind of that thing that because we do leave 2019 on a cliffhanger where it's like, will we keep touring? Will we settle down? Because I talk about in 2019 how I needed a very substantial break from touring. I was not okay continuing working at the pace that I was working at. So
Yeah.
So it's like, well, is she going to keep touring? Well, the decision was made for her for at least a year and a half, if not 2 years. So
I have to say the extent, like you both go pretty in detail into what it means to be a tour manager. And I still felt like reading it, like just for anybody who's out there watching, like how much work Meg does. And I'm only there for maybe a week at a time if I'm lucky, but the whole thing goes because of Meg. Like, I've been there from when we did a show in San Diego and we're pinned against a wall for 2 hours afterwards because there were no ropes with stanchions yet because it was just like the first ever going out on road to everything since then to now. Like if I'm going out, everything's on an app. Like just check your app. We put everything in there and everything you need. Like just it is incredible, and I'm grateful that both of you have had that year off. Well, you know what? I don't even want to get into that. Here's what I want to do. I think this would be a good time. I want to do a reading because I love the. I want people to hear some of the book.
were you going to ask if we're going to tour again?
No, no. Because I know it's been like, oh, we're gonna go. Like maybe we'll do like keeps getting moved because we don't know what it's gonna be.
We're going to tour again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm planning our 22 tour right now. So
How is it doing all of this now?
it's great, actually. It was really, when we had to keep moving dates, that was hard. Because it's like, you don't really have no idea what's going on. And then like the contracts and the deals are changing and stuff doesn't work the way it used to. But things now with the vaccines and the regulations shifting, things work like they used to. So I think there definitely will be, like, from a person going to a show experience will be a little bit different, but from a person booking on the back end right now, it's fairly similar. Other than that, there will be a glut of entertainment in 2021 and 2022. Like every theater will be booked every night with a show. So that's great. If you miss live events, every night you can fill your calendar.
Well, we have a couple questions, but before that, how about we do a reading from the book?
Okay, I'm gonna go first this time because Meg went first last time, and it's only fair. Actually, I just wanted to jump in because I was gonna read a bit about touring.
Yeah.
This time, we've been kind of just reading different bits, and so I don't know. This is I did a thing where instead of trying to work the touring into every chapter as it happened, I took the year we did our first real tour, and I put all of the touring memories from these 10 years into that one chapter as just kind of, some of these I don't even remember which year they happened exactly. I mean, it kind of doesn't matter because it's just like this whole thing that happened. A touring van is just sitting in the same tiny room with the same people for hours on end. A touring van is the changing landscape outside. Sometimes aspects of nature so astonishing that the pictures snapped with our phones can't replicate the panoramic majesty. And sometimes a disappointing blur of concrete and box stores and fading billboards so boring it feels intentionally oppressive. A touring van is a constant negotiation of when and where to go to the bathroom. The best place to go to the bathroom is Buc-ee's, a chain of absurdly large truck stops in Texas that advertise the cleanest bathrooms in America. The strangest place to go to the bathroom is a tiny bar in North Dakota with no windows, a small crowd of patrons at 10 in the morning, and a video poker machine in the bathroom facing the toilet. A touring van is its snacks, picked up at gas stations and lunch stops. At first, these were myriad, most deadly of all being the peanut butter pretzels that single-handedly contributed to a good deal of my weight gain in that first year, but gradually taste shifted to jerky, which is filling and light and often locally made. Every gas station has a jerky aisle, and I've browsed many of them. A touring van is just sitting in the same tiny room with the same people for hours on end, and yet each hour is a little different. Through the weeks and the months and the years of touring, Meg and I learned. We learned what we wanted out of a hotel. We learned how to get by in different parts of our country and our world. We learned how to eat relatively healthy while on the road, but most of all, we learned each other. In the first true way, we saw who we were at our worst moments, at the most stressful times, when the plane was delayed or almost missed, when the hotel stank of sewage or still didn't have rooms ready at 5 p.m., when the venue was lacking a backstage mirror or lights or a single staff member who was aware a show was happening that night. We learned how to be there for each other, how to not act not in opposition or as two individuals, but as a team, as a member of a unit who supported the other and took care of what the other could not. That never took their stress out on the other, or at least tried hard not to. When later we got married, it didn't seem scary or that big a step because we had already toured the world. Anything after that seemed easy. Somehow we found a British booking agent and set off on our first international tour. We hired a friend, Lauren, to tour manage. She started to feel an intense pain on our first stop. 2 stops later, in Manchester, Meg had to take her to the hospital. We went on to Birmingham without either of them. It was one of the few shows in Night Vale's history that Meg wasn't at. As it turned out, Lauren would need to be in the hospital for quite a long time. We hired a last-minute replacement as tour manager, and Meg helped out the new hire, and this was the start of Meg's transition into permanent tour manager for Night Vale. In Sweden, we played a theater that was in the hotel, a hotel that was owned by a member of ABBA. There was an elevator backstage that went up to our hotel floor. We called it the share elevator. The backstage snacks consisted only of the largest bowl of potato chips we had ever seen. We played a church in Berlin with a huge Jesus statue on the pulpit. We were told that no matter what, we were not allowed to touch Jesus. No touching Jesus, the venue manager sternly told Meg, and then we passed the message amongst ourselves. No touching Jesus, we earnestly explained to each other throughout the night. No one touched Jesus. Our flights between Stockholm, Oslo, and Copenhagen were somehow all canceled. I don't remember the details. I only remember that we had to rent a van at the last minute and drive the 6 hours from Stockholm to Oslo, do a show, then get up early the next morning to drive 7 hours to Copenhagen for the next show. The drive to Copenhagen was miserable, and we arrived to find that the promoter had put us up in a hotel that was both inside the train station and under construction. Everyone was grumpy with one another. Everyone was just grumpy, period. Then Meg and I realized that Tivoli Gardens, one of the oldest amusement parks in the world, was across the street. And so we went and rode the minecart ride twice, at the climax of which an animatronic cow turns its head slightly to look at you, and then you go down the big drop, and took pictures of a flock of peacocks that wandered the park. As the sun set, we got into the tall swings that were hoisted several stories up a pole, swinging round and round. It was not the kind of ride we usually take, but it was exhilarating and it was beautiful, the lights of Copenhagen swirling below us. And for that minute, we were once again on the grand adventure of our lives. And then we went back to the hotel, in the train station, and then to the dingy theater, and we got on with the business of performance.
I love it. That's so good. Oh, I'll clap. I just realized nobody can clap. This is where the applause happens. It's been a while.
All right. I'm going to read from 2012. So in 2012, Joseph and I moved in together. And I moved into his apartment, which was a studio that like knew somebody. So it had like a little bit more space. But it was in New York City, so it was not large. And yeah, this is while touring with your partner is an interesting milestone. Moving in together is a kind of more universal milestone than touring the world. So this is part of that from me. Joseph's apartment was sparsely furnished. The only piece was a full-size mattress and a box spring he bought when he moved into the apartment 2 years earlier. It was the cheapest one in the store and all he could afford at the time. It did not have a bed frame. Being that it was his only piece of furniture, that thing took a lot of heat. Some of it sexy, but mostly the non-sexy stuff, like being a couch, a desk, a dinner table, a bookshelf, sometimes even a stepladder. Eventually, he bought a folding table and chairs at a bodega and an inexplicably heavy TV stand at the Salvation Army to round out the set, which, after we carried it for 2 blocks and up the stairs, revealed itself to be made of some sort of particle board plutonium. That's what we were working with when I arrived with my trash bags of clothes, mismatched mugs, a collection of plays, and my bed frame from college, which at that point had been moved 3 times, an unheard of lifespan for the IKEA Segstura. We flattened her in less than 6 months, may she rest, just as we totteringly rested upon her rickety metal frame. He had a terrible cheap mattress, and I had a terrible cheap bed frame. We were a match. Our work was cut out for us. I rented a box truck. I made a list. I fucking love making a list. The year prior, our relationship survived the purchasing, subsequent hauling through New York City, and the installing of a window air conditioner on the hottest day of the summer. So I thought we were ready for an IKEA trip. And we really were. We beautifully rose to the occasion as a couple. We stayed firmly on the same team as we sorted through the IKEA gauntlet, starting with the maze of staged rooms of distraction, followed by the hall of impulse buys. Next, the forest of fake plants, then the hangar of confusingly labeled boxes, and finally, the weekend-long line of cinnamon bun-scented patience testing. We returned from the relationship shredding Scandinavian monolith as a stronger, more bonded, and meaningfully more furnished couple. I knew then we could do anything. A few weeks later, we tested our luck and returned to the great palace of particle board and Swedish horse meat balls to pick up one last piece of furniture. It did not go well. I felt like I was solely in charge of the whole getting us furniture operation, and he wasn't helping. I was overwhelmed, and then he had the stones to complain that the shopping trip was taking too long. I almost murder-suicide drove us into the East River on the way home as I tumbled into an overpacked car on the BQE-induced rage hole. But I elected to just rage scream at him instead. Relationships are not a straight line. We were building a home together with every single turn of that Allen key. I dutifully built every last fucking piece of our furniture haul and dutifully threw away the leftover pieces that mentioned anything having to do with anchoring to a wall, as you do. IKEA.
It brought back memories of that first trip. It wasn't it wasn't IKEA, it was like some
when we got the air conditioner?
Yes, we got an air conditioner on the hottest day of summer. Like we waited until it was way too late. I think we were trying to do without it.
This was before I lived with you too. So this was like, I think maybe I was like coming on the weekends and I was like, this is not happening. We need an air conditioner. Like I was the one who was like,
I remember what tipped, I don't know if you did that, but I do remember what tipped me over is there was like the night where I had to get up twice and just stand in a cold shower for a while just to like in the middle of the night and then go back completely wet and just to try to cool off a little bit. And so we went to like an appliance store near Barclay Center.
On Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. If any of you have ever driven on it, it is like one of the worst parts of the world to try to move on, like move your body physically, let alone a vehicle.
Also just a gorgeous part of the city, really beautiful place. We picked out an air conditioning unit and then we got it back. It's an air conditioning unit. So it weighs 800 pounds. We got it up there. We're doing great. We're like being okay. We're being totally cool with each other. And then it came time to install and it was so hot in that apartment. It was just like blisteringly hot. We were both in our underwear. We're just like trying to get this thing in the fucking window. And finally we both snapped and we're just like screaming at each other in our underwear, just trying to get this fucking air conditioning to work.
Yeah. I remember like ripping off my dress and being like, we can't have it be this way.
It turned into some weird Tennessee Williams play all of a sudden.
Yeah.
It's so hot, we gotta get this in the window. I can't deal.
Yeah.
That reading that IKEA story may have been one of the few times that reading a book I out loud was like, don't say it's taking too long. Please don't. No. You're too young. Don't do it. We have some questions.
Okay.
From people here. I'm going to read them and then I'll decide whether we answer these or not. First, we have 2 from Lauren Staffaroni. First, was, do we have audiobook signing technology yet? I think that's where you just yell your name, right? Isn't that an autograph, the audiobook version?
Yeah, I mean, you have like 6 hours of my voice. I feel like that's better than my signature, which it takes about 9 seconds to sign. So you have 6 hours of me talking directly to you. That's all the signature that I would ever need.
Or is audiobook autographing technology the like Ursula's like little shell in Little Mermaid where you're like, and the voice comes out? Like we could try that.
Yeah. Laura also asks, as a Good Morning Night Vale fan, I'm curious, and this comes before reading the book, so I know the answer is yes, but do you have strong, fond food memories from your relationship? So I can't believe I haven't asked this yet. Can you talk a little bit about the role of food in your relationship? I know it's touched on in the book. It's touched on in the book a lot, but like, how important is food to your relationship?
Yeah, I mean, personally, food is really important to me from a like living standpoint, but also like I have like just like I've had a sort of myriad past of disordered eating and all sorts of fun food issues. Not fun, but part of my sort of healing from that is knowing a lot about food and knowing a lot about cooking. And I'm Italian American. I think I say in the book, I'm built to feed, not built for speed. So like that's a lot of how I express love is like, oh, I've made you a meatball sandwich. Like I made you dinner. I made you something that you wanted. So food is very important to our relationship. When Joseph made me dinner tonight and I was having kind of a tired / my body hurt kind of day, and he made me like a delightful dinner, and that just felt like so much like love to me. That
It was similar to love.
Food, similar to love.
Yeah.
I grew up, we had a fresh made challah every Friday night, and it was like a big part of what felt like family to me. And Meg has learned how to make a really amazing challah. She's very, very good at it. And it feels wonderful to have that still part of my family, to have on, this Friday night thing where you gather around something that she made that didn't exist that morning, that's delicious and straight out of the oven. And it makes it feel like a celebration of being together.
But yeah, the book contains recipes.
Yes.
For those who want to cook along,
including for the challah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is true. I guess I hadn't thought about it until the book, and also talking about it with you right now, the extent to which part of what you bring to a relationship to share, like I wanted to share myself with you. And a big part of that is this is the food that was comforting or important or a milestone in my life that I want you to enjoy as well, so that it can have a place in your life, or like I feel you're important enough that I want to share this family dish with you. And that, like, to both give that and receive that is a very big thing in any relationship.
Yeah, I mean, in yours and Jen's relationship, you have that like legendary family Thanksgiving dressing situation. There was like her family, but then now you know how to cook it, and it's like very impressive, all of the work that goes into it. One day I will savor a mouthful of that.
Next time when in the after times, next time you're out in LA, I will make some and I will bring it to you.
Oh my gosh, Hal, knowing the process that goes into it.
Yeah.
Like
this is all
whole roast chickens and like
yeah. What the little bit of stuffing I've left from that giant crate that I bought. This is not about that. Dixon Galvez Cyril, I hope I said that right, says putting my sheets in the freezer was my go-to when I didn't have AC. Did you ever try that in your most desperate moments in that hot apartment?
I just did the multiple cold showers in the middle of the night method. There was no airflow in the apartment because, like most Brooklyn apartments, it was like it did not go through the building. It was the back half of the building. So I had two windows.
The back quarter of the
back,
building.
the back quarter of the building. We had our neighbors who had their we called it their hollering couch, that they would sit on about 3 feet away from the wall that we shared, and then they would just scream at our wall. We think that's what was happening. But yeah, we had like 2 windows. There was you could have those windows open, but there still was no airflow at all.
There was no windows. This apartment was very weird. But so there was a room that was a separate toilet and bookshelf. That was when we got
Built-in
it.
bookshelf.
When we got it carpeted. And then
Oh, yeah,
across
that
the
part.
apartment was the sink and shower.
Through the kitchen.
None of these rooms had windows in them.
So if you use the bathroom, you use the toilet room, and then in order to wash your hands, you have to walk through the kitchen to the sink room.
And again, not a window in the kitchen, not a window in either of the bathrooms, the toilet room or the shower room. There was one tiny window in our office room, and then the living room, which is the room we slept in, had 2 windows, and they both faced the back alley, which is where all the trash for the building was kept.
Sure.
And we were only 1 floor up.
And it was what was underneath us was a sushi restaurant, a nail salon, and a Subway Eat Fresh. So that is the trash, like 10 feet from our 2 windows.
Also, I'm pretty sure they didn't have screens, because basically if you opened your window, especially in the summer, you would instantly get the world's biggest cockroaches climbing up from the trash
Sure.
right through your window.
It was a beautiful time. I'm nostalgic for that time in my life, but I'm not nostalgic for the time in my life where that was where we lived.
Yeah, you don't want to go back to that. It's the feeling of it, right? Not like I can't wait to lug. We should go get a shitty apartment in Brooklyn and lug an air conditioner up there in the dead of summer heat.
Yeah, I think I've finally given away the air conditioner. I definitely gave away one because when we moved to our other apartment in Brooklyn, we got another window air conditioner, and I've since given both of them away. So
that one we bought, though, really, like, because that's the same when I described this in the book, I eventually dropped it out of the window and had to go retrieve it from that cockroach back alley. And that thing worked for like another 4 years just fine until we gave it away. I'm sure it's still working somewhere after having been dropped 15 feet onto concrete.
I was probably afraid after that first drop.
yeah,
What did I do wrong? Was I not cold enough? I'll be colder.
during Hurricane Sandy. So it was during a hurricane.
Yeah,
Joseph was.
It was before the hurricane.
Okay.
Because there was people still eating in the Japanese. That's the thing. So I'm like just trying to get it out. I'm in my underwear because I'm at home. Meg's not even home. There's no one else but me. So I'm just like in my underwear. And even though it was Bloomberg at the time, right?
Yes.
yeah. They said not to bring it in.
He said not to, but
Yeah.
I'd never been in a hurricane. I'm from Southern California. I don't know from hurricanes, and I just didn't feel great having it in the window. So I tried to take it in and instantly dropped it. And well, I caught it by its cord. So then the people eating, the reason I know that it wasn't the hurricane is because I looked over and there was an entire patio of people at the Japanese restaurant next door looking up at me, just leaning out of the window in my underwear, holding up this air conditioning unit. But I'm sure they were all like years later being like, have I got a New York story for you?
Yeah, this feels like one story that is in this book that could also wind up in another book at some point. Geez, is there anything? I'm trying to think if there's anything. I want to sum this up because I know where our time is running short. What is the one thing each of you hopes that someone might take away from reading the book? And I know that's kind of a weird question because a lot of it is like, well, it's a piece of art, so whatever you take away from it is the thing to take away. But do you have any hopes for what you hope is communicated, or maybe a lesson learned from it?
I think I think what I would like for the reader is for them to think about their story, whether it's their love story or the story of them growing up or that, and understand that their story is important and worth being told if they want to share it. So I think I love humans. I'm very fascinated by humans and everything that they do. And I feel like everyone has a very compelling story if they want to share it. So I hope that, if for the readers out there, that they take a look at their story and either share it or just think about it.
Man, we worked really hard on this. So I hope people like it. I hope people want to read more books by us. Like it's such a lot. It's such a long, hard process to get a book into the world. And then it's also compared to live performance, podcasting and books are both things where you mostly just put them out in the world, and they could end up meaning a lot to someone, but you're never there to find that out. You may never know. And so it's, I hope it ends up somewhere where someone finds meaning in it.
Well, it's here right now. The book is The First 10 Years. Get your copy, and if you have your copy, get copies for dads, grads, moms, everybody in your
A
life.
lovely
should have
wedding
one.
gift.
Look,
Yeah.
look
Oh,
how many
perfect.
copies there
Yes.
are.
It is wedding season, and weddings are
Wedding
starting to really happen again. So good. I'm going to add that to my spiel. Well, thank you guys. That was fantastic. Unfortunately, me like terrifyingly like jumping in again is a sign that we are actually at the end of our time together tonight, which is always very sad. That was really fun. I want to thank all three of you for being here tonight, for your support, your continued support of independent bookstores, by even agreeing to do these events with us, and just for a really great conversation. That was really great. So thank you. To
Thank you.
everybody here tonight, our participants, I also just want to thank you guys for coming. Again, it really does mean a lot to us to have you guys supporting us through this virtual format. We get the question all the time, so I'll address it. Virtual events, we've been told, probably will continue at least through the end of the summer. Maybe we'll get to be together again in person. We are hesitantly maybe already reserving some large spaces for October, and that's all I'm going to say. Anderson's, if you guys are unaware, the three of you, Anderson's does about 400 events a year, usually in person, and we get in the fall usually like some really big names in. So we're really hoping not to have to miss out on that this year, and I know everyone watching is wondering too. So that's the status on that. That's as much as I'm allowed to say. Beyond that, again, I just want to thank everyone for coming. And oh, and I wanted to mention, I was asked to mention tonight that even though Anderson's, we still have a dot matrix printer at our store, and our inventory system runs in DOS. Even with those factors in, we just leapt into the 21st century today, and we started a TikTok account. And if you want to follow us, go on over there, and we have one whole video up, and you can follow us. It's just at Anderson's Bookshops. We just wanted to get in on book talk, so we'll see.
I
how
hope
it
it's a
goes.
video of the dot matrix printer.
Oh, you know what? Maybe I'll add that. I'll add that tomorrow. All right. It is something. It is something. My friends never believe me when I take videos of it. So I don't even know how they find the parts or the paper for it anymore. Actually, it kind of
How
amazes
does the computer talk to it? Anyway.
Yeah.
because the computer is old enough to talk to it.
It's the
I
Commodore
gotta
Amiga.
tell you, like this last year and having to do everything virtual and go like, we pretty much had to transition to pure web orders for a while there. I mean, the fact that we all of us in the independent bookstore world are in the same boat with this, our operating system is ridiculous that we all use, but it's amazing we're all still here and we all survived it with the technology. We can do anything. I'm sure of that now. That's one thing I'll say.
You always
Sellers
could.
can do anything.
That's right.
So can the rest of the world, really. I think that's one thing we've learned this year. But all right. Thank you guys. Good night. Thank you so much. And I hope next time that we have you guys in for any of your books, it is in person.
Thank you so
Good night.
much.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Thank
Hal.
you.
Stay safe
Thank
out
you.
there.